Hello.
Welcome to the In Her Shoes podcast.
This is a bit different, isn't it?
You're in a different seat today. Well, you're wearing a different hat today.
I am.
You're in the interviewee seat.
I am.
How does it feel?
A little bit nerve-wracking.
How the tables have turned.
You're loving this.
I know. Usually I'm in the background, burrowing away behind the scenes. And now the lights are firmly on you.
Be nice.
We actually tried to record this podcast before, haven't we?
Yes.
In not where we are today, in a very different location.
In a very different location in sunny Boston.
Yeah, and didn't go entirely to plan.
It didn't.
So we're back for round 2.
We are.
And we're tuning in our third member live.
We are. Our executive producer, Caroline.
Hi, everybody.
How are you doing?
Sad that I'm across the pond and not with you guys. And that last week did not go as planned, but I think we'll still have a wonderful conversation. So as you guys can tell, we're interviewing Lamise today, our wonderful host. We're going to get right into it. So this is a question that you ask all of our guests. Let's go back to the beginning, Lamise. Tell us about your childhood and growing up, how it shaped you.
It's very vague, isn't it?
Tell us what you want. Yeah. We'll start easy.
My childhood, it was a childhood growing up in East London. So
not far from here.
Not far from where we are today. But growing up in East London, it was, it was tough. I think as a child, where you live in a world where you're not kind of playing out with kids because it's relatively dangerous, you're chased home from school. Sometimes you really do have to envisage and create a vision for what you want your life to be. And from a very early age, I figured out that I was doing that without really realizing that that was happening. Mm-hmm. I just knew I wanted more. And that kind of manifested itself in lots of different areas, whether it was school, whether it was work experience. I always wanted something slightly different from the norm.
An instinctive drive.
Yeah.
And look at you now. You've come so far, Lamise. But yeah, you said you wanted more. You always envisaged more, and maybe not necessarily the normal route that people tend to take through those school ages and through the sort of university path. You've touched on this previously, your sort of experience or inexperience in that area, but you did start university under the guise of becoming a lawyer.
I did.
And that didn't necessarily pan out.
No, not quite.
But I think, yeah, a totally different avenue came from it. And do you want to talk a bit about what that transition looked like for you, sort of how that aspiration came to be and how you maybe pivoted away from it?
I think that my university moment, like if I even take it back to school, I probably had like instinctive moments where even my parents probably thought, oh, maybe university isn't going to be for her. And I remember one time at school, this was like during GCSE time, and do you remember when you'd have to have work experience or placement for a couple of weeks?
I do.
And
Can you explain for the Americans what time period in your life that is? Because
so
we don't have any context
15, 16?
Yeah, 15,
okay,
16.
Gotta make sure that we're being
inclusive. And so typically what happens at that time, you find a placement, and that can be with, I don't know, in your mum's office,
yeah,
or at the local dentist.
Lots of shops, lots of schools.
Yes.
Yeah.
And again, that whole feeling of wanting more or wanting something different, that just didn't fit me and my narrative. And so I was doing a dance class. I was doing a dance class every Thursday, and it was like a Bollywood dance class that I did. Loved it, and it was just something where I was kind of expressing my creativity through dance. One week, you know what Comic Relief is, right?
I do.
Yeah. So for everybody that doesn't know what Comic Relief is, it's a charity. It's a charity, and they broadcast once a year and run a ton of events, sometimes nationally, sometimes locally. And one of the local events that they were recording was this dance class for charity. So they came one Thursday to the session, and I remember thinking, God, like, what a great place to do work experience at Comic Relief. Mm-hmm. They broadcast on the BBC. I didn't know that maybe I wanted to ever get into media. I didn't think that was a thing, but I just wanted something different.
Yeah.
And so I was up at 5 a.m. that morning, you know, doing my hair, doing my makeup.
Gotta look the part.
Gotta look the part. And my mum was like, what the hell are you doing? And she couldn't understand. And then it kind of all made sense to her as we approached the dance class and she saw all these cameras everywhere. And she was like, the penny dropped. That's what she was doing. And so I navigated my way having this conversation with this woman from Comic Relief, was helping her out. Do you need any help? Like, can I help you with this? Just really wanting to add value wherever I could. And by the end of the conversation, I just said, you know, would it be possible? I'm looking for some work experience, like unpaid, to have that work at Comic Relief. And she just said, oh my God, like, you know, absolutely. It may not be with me and my team, but let me give you my card and follow up and we'll get something sorted. For the next 5 weeks, with no word of a lie, between every class, every break at school, I was in the toilets. Hello, can I speak to Sherry from Comic Relief, please?
Yeah.
She was not getting, she wasn't making it easy, put it that way. But I was being heavily persistent and I wanted that placement. Eventually I got it. That was the moral of the story. Took me 5 weeks and it ended up leading to a summer job, and I was actually on TV on the BBC in front of Rachel Stevens.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is a celebrity moment.
I know.
I think it really speaks volumes that so many people see people in successful positions, or you see, you know, you were inspired by that lady and her role and you reached out for that for a reason, and it took 5 weeks, but it could take 5 months for some people, it could take 5 years for lots of people. And I think that, again, like relentless drive that you just have to keep going is such an important message. And the fact that you had that in you from such a young age, and sort of like untrained, you know, like your mum didn't have a clue what you were doing.
No,
it wasn't like you were guided in that sense. That's such an inherent trait that you clearly possess, and it's stood you in such good stead.
I think it's also a fact of probably a product of growing up in a family where I wasn't born into money, and so I kind of knew that I had to, in my mind, change the game. I wanted something bigger,
be self-made.
Yes. And so it was, how am I going to manifest this into a reality? And it really was, I know there's a lot of negativity around the word hustle, but the truth is that's exactly what I was doing. I was hustling in every way I could to ensure that my voice was heard, that I was making moves, and I was kind of making the change and not following the traditional path that had been, you know, laid out before me, which was takes me to the law degree. And my parents really wanted me to be safe and steady and, you know, kind of follow in their footsteps. And the truth is, within weeks of being, I went to Kingston University in the UK, and honestly, within a few weeks I was like, no,
not for me.
I was so depressed. You know, I couldn't do the whole freshers thing. It wasn't me. Like I'd go out now and again, but I was not about drinking vodka like every night.
No. It's such a shock to the system anyway. And if you're not that way inclined, or you realise it's not for you, that is so easy to be misconstrued into, oh, well, it's just, you know, I'm just moved out of to uni halls, or, oh, it's just first year fear. And I feel like a lot of people overlook that and don't listen to that sort of inner voice, that gut instinct, if you will. Because it is young, you're you know, you're in your teenage years, and it's really hard to tune into that if you're not used to listening to yourself, trusting yourself, and you're getting outside influence from.
It's something that I think I've learned definitely doing this podcast as well, just having a lot of the conversations that we've had, which is that the younger generation, so the people who are now in schools or in college and they're about to take those, you know, quite significant next steps. I don't think that they're properly supported, and I don't think that they're guided in the right way by the right people, all well-intentioned, but I just don't think that they're given the right tools to make those decisions at such an early age.
Yeah, I agree.
Also, something different in the US versus the UK is that when you guys go to university, you're automatically on a path. You're on a path to what your presumed career is, versus in the States, if you want to be a lawyer, you still have to go to 4 years of school, and you study in a subject matter that helps you think critically, and it can depend on what you're interested in. And then you have to apply to law school, and that's another situation. Or like if you want to be a doctor, you know, you could be pre-med, but you still have to learn other things. Where in the UK, it seems like you're 17 years old and saying, I know what I want my career to be, which is, I mean, when I was 17, I thought I was going to be the next like Christian Amanpour. That was going to happen. So I think it's a very interesting like contrast, and like it is, but I do think that in both places, there's a lot of pressure on young people to know what their life looks like. And that's so impossible in a changing landscape of what the economy looks like and what growth in your career looks like and how you can actually pivot as you go through your career, especially in the first 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, which is also why I think this kind of concept is so important, because we're learning from people, right? People that have walked a path that potentially, you know, you guys, our listeners, want to walk down. And I think as we evolve with this podcast, we want to diversify the people that we're speaking to ensure that we're kind of matching.
For sure.
You know, it's not just in tech or it's not just in media. We want to make sure that there's a well-rounded blueprint that we're creating, because I do think that you can only learn so much from business books and theory.
Agree.
And the rest is real life wisdom. You know,
have to apply it. You know, that's exactly what Caroline was talking about. You know, you learn these things at university, you learn these things in your role, but if you can't apply, you know, action what you've learned, it's entirely useless. But yeah, speaking of technology also and pivoting, you weren't always in this glamorous digital technology world, were you?
No.
You started off in something far more humble, in regional sales and marketing for Mercedes.
Yeah.
So how did you spot that, you know, transition in the wind? How did you see, you talk about manifesting and hustling, and clearly you're persistent, but how did you come to the realization that was maybe something that you wanted to aim for?
So the Mercedes-Benz situation is quite interesting, because at university, bear in mind, I didn't feel like I fitted in. I felt like such an outsider. I struggled to kind of make friends, especially in the first year where everybody wanted to go out. And so in my free time, what I really wanted to do was set up a business. I didn't quite know exactly what type of business, but I knew that my passion was fashion at the time. I had no business being in fashion. But
look at these trousers, Louise. Of course you do.
I just knew I had an eye, you know? Like, I didn't go to the London College of Fashion, but I knew what style was. And so I created a blog to talk about trends and the trends that were in that season and how you can apply them to create an outfit. And from that blog, I got a lot of interest, essentially saying, you know, do you do this as a service? Would you be prepared to do a day personal shopping with me? I was like, oh,
I could do that.
I'll quickly draw up a rate card.
Yeah.
$1,000, pounds,
exactly.
euros.
How much do you think I'm worth?
Which was a great side hustle. You know, while you're at university, having that cash was fantastic. And
the dream.
Yeah. And so after doing a few of those, I was like, wow, okay, this is great. But there's a real problem here. And what I realized is it was more men, actually bizarrely, reaching out saying that they needed support. And the problem that they were having was they didn't have a girlfriend. They wanted to date. They didn't feel they looked the part. They were actually lacking confidence. And they wanted a woman to be able to help advise them, kind of to elevate and level up their style. So that was definitely the audience and the market that I was working toward. But it made me realize that this problem is universal. This isn't just a London, Kingston, UK problem. This is a global problem.
It's an epidemic, guys.
And so what that led to was, how do I scale this idea? My mannequin was born. And my mannequin was an app that I created. I didn't build it. We had seed funding to get this built. And essentially it was an app that you would come to. You would answer a series of questions that asked you about your lifestyle, your brand, your budget, the things that you like. And it would aggregate an outfit for you from the brands that you've said that you liked, whether it was Reese, H&M, Zara. It sounds very familiar, doesn't it?
It does sound very familiar to our day job.
And you would then purchase through the app. And so it was solving that choice paralysis for fashion. Probably explains a lot about where we are today. Yeah.
It does.
And so that piece of me, kind of that business side, it was all consuming. I was hugely passionate about it. And every free moment I had, I did not want to be chilling out with friends or going out. I wanted to be partaking in building this business. Fast forward, obviously I speak about it, kind of think it's in the second or the third episode of In Her Shoes. And I talk about kind of the investor story and how the company essentially failed. I then rock bottom. Like, I cannot tell you, that was probably one of the darkest times of my life, because it was the biggest failure I'd ever had.
Well, you were on such a high. It was going so well.
It was going well. There was a market there. There was interest. I had an investor in LA who was interested. He was essentially mentoring until I got to a certain stage, and then it all comes shattering down. And there were so many life lessons for me to learn in that. But what it led me to was back sitting in my bedroom thinking, right, what am I doing with my life? And I kind of felt that in that moment, there was no other choice but to just get a job. I needed to pay the bills. And so I remember, and I think I talk about it as well, which is getting that receptionist job at Mercedes-Benz. And I'm answering the phone, hello, this is Lamise at Mercedes-Benz. I swear to God, it was the most like depressing time because you've got a degree, which I didn't want to have in the first place. You've built a business, so you know how to construct the Lego
street
pieces.
smart.
Yeah.
You can apply your degree.
Yes.
Yeah, you've been around the block.
I'm now sitting...
Your front of house.
Right.
At a car dealership. We've all seen them. It's not the most glamorous of roles.
No.
And you're coming in here with experience.
With experience, yeah.
And yeah, you're rightfully so. You're sort of questioning what you're doing.
And it was hard. So I think it took me about 2 weeks of answering those phones, you know, through gritted teeth to then say, right, I've got to turn this into something. And again, that child in me that woke up at 5 a.m. that wanted to get that woman at Comic Relief's attention and get that placement came back. And it was like, how can I use the people that I've got in this kind of format to show and add value here that will elevate me to another level? What I quickly realized is that the way that Mercedes-Benz were operating was flawed. So ultimately, the way that they were running their sales process, the efficiencies in their operations, it was all flawed. So I kind of did a bit of analysis while I'm sitting there answering the phones, in between answering the phones, writing notes and picking up all of these key nuggets that I knew I could add value with. And essentially applied all of that, managed to navigate all the way through to head office, which when I look back now, you know, that it's not an easy thing to do, but it really did take a lot of no's. I think I reached out to about 50 people on LinkedIn saying, you know, this is what I'm currently doing. I'm at Mercedes-Benz, I'm at a local dealership, but this is what I'd love to do. This is my experience. This is what I've done. I'd love to have a conversation. I'd even love to get help, you know, get some help from you and advice on how to tailor my CV to get the attention of, let's say, your boss. 50 people, one person replied.
That is not a bad ratio.
But,
I know it feels like it at the time, but that is really not a bad ratio.
But all you need is the one, right?
That's all you need.
That's all you need. And that person who I, you know, to this day thank for almost just giving me that olive branch, because we then met, we became really good friends, and actually that was the start of me getting into Mercedes-Benz. And very quickly, once I was in the business, once you're adding value, the visibility is very apparent.
It speaks for itself.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you're coming into it from, you know, you've got sales experience, you've got clearly a good head on your shoulders, and you're proving that you can use that, the business is going to strategically want to maximize its reward from you. So I think you both got a good end of the deal there.
Yes.
Actually.
All right. Now we're on borrowed time, as they say. So I'm going to go to the next question, which I think the next two ones are my favorite questions to ask you. All right. So I've worked with you for 3.5 years. My first intro to Lamise was I was going over to London with the company that I work with, both with you ladies. And someone said, oh, Lamise is so beautiful. And I was like, is she anything else? This is bizarre. What a strange thing to say about somebody who, like, I knew you as somebody who was working with one of our biggest customers. And I was just like, okay, is there anything else to this person? And then as our working in relationship changed, you took a little hiatus, a little break, came back to the business, and something in you fundamentally changed, where you looked around and like determined that you wanted to do something different in the workplace and in your outside career and outside of your life. What was the catalyst for you to look around and say, I need to be uplifting women in the workplace more and just outside?
It's a really good question. I think that always, and within life, I think I've always had this want and need to create impact. And one of my favorite quotes ever, if I ever had a tattoo or got a tattoo, it would be the change that you want to see in the world. That is like me, and I've always tried to embody that quote. And the one thing that I do know, and I actually heard this, I can't remember if it was on Stephen Bartlett's recent podcast or in his book, but he basically talks about the fact that you can't pour from an empty cup. And so one thing I realized is that I needed to build myself up to a point that I had a full cup to pour from, because there's no point me kind of as an empty shell talking about career progression and creating a blueprint and, you know, trying to help people navigate through successes and challenges if I haven't been through them. And so I think I'd reached a point in my career where I'd learned so much that I was ready to take all of that knowledge, package it and give back, because the things that I'm noticing and that I'm seeing, quite frankly, I'm just not okay with now. And I don't think that they should exist. I don't think that we should be working in the way that we operate, especially you know, from a woman's perspective. I think, yes, everybody says we've come a long way, but we've not come far enough. And there's still a lot of work to do. And I was reading an article in the Harvard Business Review, which talks about, it's largely the last piece that's left is stereotypes. It's the stereotype that still exists subconsciously within organizations that needs to go. And that is going to take time, because that's psychology. It's the hardest part to change. You know, creating new processes and, you know, stamping a diversity, equity and inclusion flag, you know, on your value playbook is one thing. But actually embodying what that means everyday behaviors is hard. Allowing a woman to have her voice in the boardroom. She's not the woman taking notes. You know, she is the woman that's kind of navigating the conversation. That should be the norm in everyday business life.
Exactly. We shouldn't be applauding the one case or example of that. This needs to be frequent and loud and impossible to ignore.
Yes.
I think it's also when you have to like give a company a high five for adding a woman to the board.
Exactly.
Or to saying, oh, like, you know, XYZ% of our senior leadership is women. It's like, great, that shouldn't have to be something that you push up. It should just be what it is.
Or even have to aim for it.
And it's important, obviously, to know these things. And even when you look for new roles, like, I do consider that. Like, I don't want to be in a team that's mostly men. Or if I see a senior leadership team that does not have diversity of gender and race, I'm thinking this is not a place that I feel will embody values that matter to me. And I also kind of have an assumption that there's probably going to be a dearth of empathy in that organization.
Well, you've said the key word, which is empathy. You know, having women at that table is good for business. And the quicker that we as a global environment realize that, from everything from business to politics, the better we will be, because that lack of empathy only gives room for more egos.
Completely.
Let's talk about, egos are very common in some circles that we all know of.
No comment.
Okay, so let's talk about this podcast in general. So this is, as mentioned earlier, our last episode of season 1, which is hard to believe because you didn't bring Lydia and I into this idea of yours until, I don't know, late May, I want to say, early June, and it is now
It was
October
fully fledged.
19th.
There was no, I'm thinking about doing this. It was, I'm doing it.
Oh, well, for me, it was I got on a call with Lamise after, I don't know, hadn't talked to her for a few weeks. She starts saying a bunch of nice things to me, and my mind is like, she's either proposing to me or we're breaking up, but like we're not in a relationship, so what's happening here? Like, I really was like,
So where's my ring, Louise? Is what I'm hearing.
Where is my ring? Or I was like, what's happening here? And you told me about this idea, and that because of our working relationship and how well I understood your voice, and then unbeknownst to you, you did not know that I have a background in women's studies and women's empowerment, which I think is funny, because anybody who knows me knows that's something that's like deep into me, or who knows me outside of the workplace.
Yeah.
So for me, I was an immediate yes, because I have always wanted to lift up women wherever I have been. I think that if you've ever worked with me, you're aware of that. If you're my friend, you know that. But the question is, why now? And like, what drove you to take this chance?
It's a really good question. I think,
Thank you.
I think the why now question is, and we talk about this kind of daily in our little WhatsApp chat. We'll always be sending each other kind of, whether it's TikToks that are relevant or reels that are happening. The moment and the movement that we're going through right now as a global community speaks to the amount of voices and the collaborative effort that needs to exist to make change. And I think that we've all been blessed with a voice, and I think that we have a duty to use it for the next generation to make our world a better place. And if there's only, you know, if we're just a ripple in the ocean, that's all I'd be happy with that, because that's all I need it to be. It needs to affect change in the way that I want young girls who are at school to not think that they're pigeonholed into kind of the circle or the square of their futures, but actually that there's a world of option out there for them, and how they navigate that, you can learn from others and have that blueprint. And it kind of goes back to the fact that when I was young, and I don't know about you guys, I didn't have a blueprint. I didn't have a female North Star. I didn't. And the difficulty is that you then look at, you know, the men that are in those roles. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. Like, if it was of equal standing and then you still chose to look at the man because you think he's super successful, great, that's your blueprint. The problem was that was all that existed.
Exactly. The option wasn't there.
Well, I also think that when you're young, you have an idea of what, you know, you watch TV and movies, and it's always these glamorous jobs of like the 25-year-old who's an editor at a magazine, which never would happen.
Yeah.
Or just these things that like are just so far fetched from reality
totally
that
unattainable.
You have no concept of that there's a whole other world out there of organizations. Like, somebody has to sell the lumber that built your house.
Yeah.
That could be a really interesting place for you to work that you could get paid well. Like, there's so many more things than just like the B2C consumer glamorous brands or Hollywood or whatnot that are so important to our economy. And you can actually, which I know I keep saying that, but it is relevant that like not everyone's going to have an MBA or be a lawyer and whatnot, but you can rise the ranks in an organization, have a really meaningful career that's successful without having these glamorous jobs. And I think that's something that I've really enjoyed about this podcast thus far, and will continue to, is that we're highlighting women who have got seats at the table that don't necessarily have a PR machine behind them. They don't have like a narrative of like, look at me, I'm this one person, this one place. These are women that you can actually relate to their careers and their path and take their lessons and utilize them for yourself.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
I know. And do you have a favorite lesson in these?
Do I?
Do you have a favorite lesson?
You know, all the episodes have been so incredible in their own way, and they've all had golden nuggets within them. I mean, two things. One, I will never forget Sarah Cugini's definition of what success was, which was getting a briefcase. I mean,
and having lunch.
Getting a briefcase and having lunch. That was like,
that's top tier.
Well, it's honestly like when you think about when you're like when you're young, you're like, what will like a work day look like?
That total freedom.
There, you go on you take the commute.
Lunch is a massive decision.
It is. And so when you're working kind of, and I can imagine, you know, where in Boston or in London, it's like the world is your oyster.
It is.
We're gonna have Pret today. We're gonna have Leon today. You know, what are we gonna have
for choice?
Yeah. So that was a real moment that I think we'll just because it was such a, and she even,
it was so true, and it was so honest, and it was so for where the heights that she's reached, it was really quite humbling to know that was her first sort of vision of success.
Yes. And you said the word there, humble. The one thing about every single guest that we've had on, I have been so inspired by how humble each of them are. They're all so successful and such powerhouses, but they're so humble.
Yeah.
And they're really willing to kind of give back and want to help others. And I think that it kind of was the spark to say, right, for season 2 we've got to do this. And you know, and it was the fuel for the fire, because now knowing that there are women who are it's not just us, you know, it's not just this little trio that we've got here that want to create these stories and give back. Actually, there are lots of women out there who don't want to be part of, you know, those closed door organizations where they help each other network from VP and above level, but actually
what about the rest of us?
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I met you on my first day of work, Lamise, albeit digitally. Very much like this, actually. This is giving me quite the throwback to my first experience of you. And I was, had I been, you know, in the office, I would have been able to get lunch and had that decision. But having now known you for, similar to Caroline, you know, over 3 years, I only envisage you in one particular shoe. And I can only imagine now that when I, was on that Zoom call with you, that you had those shoes on. But do you want to tell us what your power shoe is, Louise?
Well, will you tell me what you think my power shoe is?
Well, it's got to be the highest stiletto that you could possibly ever put your foot in.
Yes, correct. Well, so here's the thing. I am a blend between two things, and I'm like New Balance, very much like your gazelles.
I've gone for a trainer today.
I'm so here for those. Like, I'm a khaki New Balance kind of girl on a day-to-day basis. Like, I came in my New Balance.
I was going to say, I can vouch. She was wearing those on the way in.
I was wearing those on the way in.
Now, she was wearing them in Boston too, with the same pants.
With the same.
She's leveled up for the London episode.
Yeah. But my heel for if I'm going into a business meeting or a boardroom, it's the sock boot, the black sock boot.
Oh, and interesting.
The reason I love the sock boot is because Bowie actually said something when I asked her about her power shoe, and she said, I do love, like, she loved high heels kind of early in her career, and she's bought so many, but actually she's a trainer girl now.
Yeah.
And the reason she's a trainer girl is when you're moving from meeting to meeting in a male dominated world, they ain't wearing heels.
You got to be quick.
No,
you got to beat them to the door.
Be nimble.
Yeah, agile. Elbows out, ladies.
Yes, and so that's why she wears trainers. And so the sock boots for me are
they provide the security.
They provide security, so I could run in those boots, and don't test me because I will.
That is a testament to those. We need to get them on the phone. That is pretty insightful.
Yeah,
but I can only ever imagine you in heels now going forward, and I'm so glad that you're wearing them today.
I am.
But
I do want to ask Lydia, because as we wrap up. Has there been a moment of advice or anecdote that stood out to you for the first season?
I think it's just, like you said, been so interesting to hear people sort of struggle or realizing that is so normal. Like there was 1 in 50 for you, that person that reached out to you on LinkedIn or ended up saying yes to, but there is somebody's 1 in 50 everywhere, and nobody sees that, and it's really easy to feel really lost when you're trying to pivot or get into a new industry or get a promotion, and you just need backing and support and a little bit of encouragement to tell you that keep going, you're doing the right thing, it's just going to take time. It's really easy to lose sight of that, and just hearing the wealth of experience that these women have had, and that has been a really common theme in everybody's story, despite the sort of diversity between them all, I think is what I have taken most solace in.
Well, I'm really excited for season 2. I don't know about you.
I'm thoroughly excited. What about you, Caroline? We're going to have to fly you over. Do you think that's in the budget?
I mean, so for context, Sarah Cagini was one of my first bosses. So hearing her talk about her her career in a way that I've heard about it for a while now. I know it, but I didn't know some of the intricacies about it. And also her talking about how she became more empathetic after having her first child, and me remembering how seeing that change in her as my boss was cool. I think that for me, as somebody who is neurodivergent and have known my entire life that I am, hearing Vanessa's story and knowing, I can't imagine what it would be like to learn later on in life that you have ADHD or autism, because you haven't had the tools your entire life to navigate that.
Yeah.
And it made me grateful for the fact that I have had those tools for a lot longer, and that also there are people who are so open to talking about that they are not neurotypical is really it's comforting to me. And I think that that's really important to hear, because 15% of people are neurodivergent, but we kind of hold them down, literally physically holding them down, not actually. That was just really nice to hear how she's taken those diagnoses and used it in such a thoughtful and empathetic manner, where she's so proud of herself for it. Not for the diagnosis, but for
how she's handled it.
Neurodivergent. She's not ashamed of it. And that, not that I ever have been, but I think I probably have been when I was younger. But it was just really comforting to hear that story and have someone be so proud of who they really are and not be ashamed.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely make a commitment to being more diverse in season 2 and really committing to.
We've already gotten some.
Oh, don't give it away.
Yeah, no teasers.
In the works. I didn't say anything else.
No teasers. You're gonna have to tune in.
Yeah.
We've been trying to be very intentional about diversity in terms of industry, identities, and just showcasing all the women that are just crushing it. I was gonna say bosses, but I really am over, like, boss babe
Resist.
or girl boss. I think that we've evolved from that actually culture,
Yes,
hopefully.
we have.
But yeah, this was really fun, and
Thank you
I
so
think
much,
we're all really
Louise.
excited for season 2 to happen. And thank you everybody who's listened to the first season and has been along for this beginning of our journey. It's definitely not over. It's just
beginning.
begun.
It's just the start of something new.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me in this seat today.
Yes, we'll have to do it again sometime.
We will. Thank you, girls.
Thank you.